Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where we say, I never said your boss isn't an asshole. I never said your boss isn't a gigantic piece of crap. But here's the fact of the matter. Your boss is your boss. So if you want to keep your job, you might want to do what the boss asks for. It's funny, I talk about Microsoft a lot lately. Like, Microsoft has been infested by the blue hairs who are just losing their damn minds right now. Especially with Microsoft, supporting the things, the events going on in the Middle East, right? And it's funny when I talk about this kind of stuff because, I try to talk about things from like the perspective of keeping your job and also from the perspective of ethnic cleansing and basically how to try to square this particular circle. And it's always funny because I get people in the comment stream and they're like, what is this? You state that it's ethnic cleansing that Microsoft is supporting, and then you laugh at the protesters that are protesting Microsoft as their employees. What's wrong with you? And it's like, well, you work for a company that supports genocide. Your paycheck comes from a company that supports genocide. Here's the deal. Do you want to keep getting your paycheck? That's it. Right? That's what I get from people. Eli, how do I get it? Right? It's not how do I fix problems or what stack should I use. How do I get a fucking job? Well, here's the thing. I don't know. If you want to get a job at a company that supports genocide, then, you probably shouldn't be protesting that genocide. It's just how the real world works. I really don't know what the kids are expecting out of me. If you don't like that, go work for the Red Cross. Red Cross needs tech support. Go out and build your own tech company or whatever else. But anyways, the important thing to understand about your boss is they are in fact your boss. If you want to keep getting your paycheck, you probably don't want to protest your boss. But what do I know? I'm not a boomer. I think this is interesting right now with Coinbase. With the Lex Luthor wannabe. Look at that Lex Luthor wannabe. Coinbase CEO explains why he fired engineers who didn't try AI immediately. So I think this is going to be a big thing coming up. As I've talked about before, employees are fucking worthless. I'm not saying you're worthless in the eyes of the spaghetti monster. But for most of you at the companies that you're working for, you are worthless. It is more valuable for you to not exist at the company than it is for you to exist at the company. And one of the things I've tried to explain with this kind of thing is when you get into this type of world, this psychological just insanity that we're dealing with right now, shit starts getting really weird, right? As I've talked about before, it's like the whole thing like, when there's economic problems, companies will do things like layoffs, right? Okay, so we're not making as much money as we were before, or plans didn't go how we thought they were going to go, and so we're going to lay off X number of people. The problem that you run into, though, with so many of these companies, right? These companies make all their money, their real money from investors. One of the problems we have in our current capitalist system is it literally isn't about profit anymore. It's not about profit. It's about investors, right? It's about the value of stock, not how much profit you make for every widget you sell, and then how many widgets are you able to sell per month, right? And so the issue is if we had a pretty sane capitalist system, what would happen is basically, right, demand goes up, demand goes down, you need to get rid of people. Most of your money comes from profit, ergo you get rid of people, that's expenses that go away, then that should protect your profit, right? You're protecting your profit, and so the company is still successful. right? The issue, though, is everything is being driven by investors. And so when you do layoffs, you have to be very careful because that can spook investors, right? The way that these technical companies prove to investors that they were successful, right? If revenue sucked and profit sucked and user growth sucked and all that kind of stuff, what they do is they hired people, right? We obviously were successful because we're hiring people. We wouldn't be hiring people if we weren't successful. Ergo, we're successful. Ergo, you should give us tens of billions of dollars, right? Anyways, the problem that you run into is when these companies actually start having to do layoffs, right? When the rocket on the turkey starts sputtering, right? They have to start doing layoffs, and say they'll do a round of layoffs. They can do a round of layoffs, or they can maybe do 2 rounds of layoffs. And many times the investors will accept that, right? Okay, right? We're post-COVID. We're pre-this, whatever you do, you have to do layoffs. Most of the time, investors are kind of okay. But if you do it the second round of layoffs, if you have to do a third round of layoffs, there's a concern of spooking the investors, where the investors get scared. Right? Well, right, if adding employees means you're successful, then dumping shit tons of employees probably means you're failing. And I don't want to have my money in a failing company. And if all the value of the company is in the value of the stock, that becomes a really concerning thing. And that's why you start seeing things like these companies enforce return to office mandates, right? They don't really need everybody to return to office. Now, I'm not anti-return to office. To be clear, I think a good chunk of people should actually work at the office. But not not everybody, right? It should be a sensible, well thought out, articulated policy. But what you're noticing nowadays is we're not getting sensible, well thought out, articulated policies. We're just being told everybody needs to come to the office, right? 2 years ago, everybody needed to be remote, and now everybody needs to come to the office. The reason for that is because a lot of people are not going to be able to come to the office, or they're not going to be willing to come to the office, and then they're going to quit. Well, here's the thing, right? When I run a company and I have employees quit, I don't have to tell anybody about that, right? If I lay people off, there's things called the Warren Act, right? I actually have to tell the government, maybe in states or whatever country that I'm in, I have to tell the government that I'm going to be laying people off. This has to go into SEC filings. There's a whole bunch of places where especially if you do massive layoffs, this all has to be put out there publicly, right? If you just have a shit ton of employees quit, you don't have to tell anybody about that. Ergo, you can get rid of headcount without spooking the investors. The problem we start getting into, though, in this world is the CEOs and the executives start looking at their employees truly like garbage, truly like trash, right? They see their employees, and they realize they need to reduce their headcount massively. But because of many reasons, it's difficult to reduce the headcount in a sensible way. So what happens is you start getting insensible shit. And I think that's one of the interesting things, again, with this whole AI push, right? The whole thing with AI is these executives can come out and they're not laying off people because they failed being managers over the past couple of years. They're laying off people because AI has changed everything. Right? Well, what happens? What happens when you have the executives looking at their employees as trash? Literally, how do we eliminate 50%? Like, think about this. I've talked about this before when I had my company, all right? And I put out a help wanted ad, and I get 100 plus resumes, right? 100 plus resumes. And one of the big things I had to do was figure out how to get rid of resumes, right? One of the reasons that I say the hiring process should be relatively blind in many ways is because I was not always the greatest human being in the world, right? When you've been working a 14-hour day, when you're absolutely exhausted, and you pull out a resume, and the person's name is fucking 12 consonants in a row with absolutely no vowels, why? I got 100 resumes, I gotta whittle that shit down to 20. 80 of those resumes gotta go in the trash can. I'm really fucking exhausted. You got too many consonants in your name. going in the trash can. Again, to be clear, why should be blind, right? So when I talk about Silicon Dojo, authorityless, gatekeeperless, free to the end user, there's a reason that I'm trying to build Silicon Dojo on those principles, because I was not always the greatest of human beings with certain things. But here's the thing, right? Think about that employer, right? Getting 1,000, right? You hear about this. I put out 2,000 resumes. Imagine this, if you're an employer and you have one position open or two positions open and you get 2,000 resumes, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen to 1,900 of them? Anyways, but think about this psychologically from the position of, you've already hired these people you gotta get rid of. What happens when you have 1,000 employees and you really only need 500? You only need 500 positions. All of a sudden, you got to eliminate 500 people somehow. And you've had a long day, and you've had investors screaming at you, you have every other goddamn thing happening. So the question is how do you do this with the employees that you have? The Coinbase CEO decided he would come out with mandates that engineers needed to use AI immediately. And if they didn't, he fired their asses. So be careful about this. Coinbase CEO explains why he fired engineers who didn't try AI immediately. Because you needed to dump fucking employees? Because you were having a bad day? Because you had been a shit manager and this makes you look cool to the tech bros? I'm sure that's going to be the reasons, right? Anyways, it's hard to find programmers these days who aren't using AI coding assistants in some capacity, especially to write repetitive, mundane bits. But those who refused to try the tools when Coinbase bought enterprise licenses for GitHub Copilot and Cursor got promptly fired, CEO Brian Armstrong said this week. After getting licenses to cover every engineer, some of the cryptocurrency exchange warned Armstrong that adoption would be slow, predicting it would take months to get even half the engineers using AI. Now, one of the things you do have to be thinking about this, and you're like, why would engineers be slow with implementing AI? Is do remember, they're doing jobs. They would actually like to go home to their wives or spouses and kids and do all that kind of thing. And when you have new tools, here's the question one of the big questions is it actually going to make things better? Right? How many times has a new tool rolled out that was supposed to improve your professional life exponentially, and it was just a troubleshooting piece of crap, right? And so that's one of the things. Like if you see AI being rolled out and you see some engineers that might be cautious about it, one of the reasons they might be cautious about it is they have their workflows. They have their ways of doing things. They have the tasks that they already have on hand. And now this is a new thing coming into the pipeline that they have to figure out how the hell it fits in, right? So there is some reason why people would be cautious about this. And also, again, from an engineering standpoint, understanding what you're actually looking at. Like, I think that's one of the big things. Like, you hear about vibe coding and all that. Oh my God, people won't shut up about vibe coding. But like, what are you actually looking, like when you get the code out of the AI, what is it that you're actually getting out? Like, you know, if you don't know shit about what you're doing, you're a CEO that starts vibe coding, you're like, I have a web app. Yeah, but are global variables and local variables being used appropriately, right? Could variables in the system be set to global for some reason and start causing just a hash in the code base that you already have. What is the naming convention? How do you deal with the naming conventions to make sure when people are reading or auditing the code, they know what the hell they're looking at? Styling and everything else, right? There's syntax. When you program, there's syntax, and those are the commands that you actually have to use, the code blocks that you actually have to use. And there's styling, right? Are you tabs or are you spaces? This is important to very lame people. But it is important, right? If you have some people using tabs, you have some people using spaces, right? Right? Again, what if you have AI? What if AI is doing things appropriately, right? PEP 8 standards. What if your AI is going pure PEP 8? But the rest of your coders are doing what the hell they've been doing for the past 5 years. All right, you can actually run into issues. You can use tabs or spaces, but you can't put them into the same file. There's issues. Anyways, so that's one of the things. Like when you start thinking about AI, it's not simply about like looking at that output. It's about truly understanding what that output actually is and putting the brain power in to just sit there and just stare at your computer screen. Right? You ever have that? You put something in your computer screen and you grab a cup of coffee and you just sip the cup of coffee as you just stare at the screen. You're not even scrolling, right? You're just like, you're just letting the concept like wash out, like, right? So if you're told you have to use AI immediately, there is a reason engineers would be a little slow with it from a practical standpoint. But here's the thing, when you gotta get rid of people, when employees gotta go, motherfuckers gotta go. All right? Anyway. Armstrong was shocked at the thought. I went rogue, he said, which is also interesting. Think about the CEO of the company. CEO of the company, right? This is the leader of the company literally saying that he went rogue. How comfortable does that make you feel? Your CEO gets pissed off. Your CEO gets angry. Your CEO gets all emotional. And then, he said, and posted a mandate in the company's main engineering Slack channel. I said, AI is important. We need you all to learn it and at least onboard. You don't have to use it every day until we do some training, but at least onboard by the end of the week. And if not, I'm hosting a meeting on Saturday with everybody who hasn't done it, and I'd like to meet with you to understand why. I'd like to understand why. At the meeting, some people had reasonable explanations for not getting their AI assistant accounts set up during the week, like being on vacation, Armstrong said. I jumped on this call on Saturday, and there were a couple of people that had not done it. Some of them had a good reason because they were just getting back from some trip or something, and some of them didn't have a good reason, and they got fired. Boss tells you to do something, you don't do it, you might think you have a good reason for not doing it, your ass still gets fired. Armstrong admits that it was a, quote, a heavy-handed approach, and there were people in the company who didn't like it. While it doesn't sound like very many people were fired, Armstrong said it sent a clear message that AI is not optional. No, it sent a very fucking clear message that the CEO is not mentally stable. And if you don't say, sir, yes, sir, and do whatever the fuck dumbass shit comes out of his mouth, your ass might get fired by the end of the week. But anyways, you can shine that turd, put a little AI stamp on it, and say it's all about AI. This is not about the mental instability of the CEO of Coinbase. This is not about the CEO of Coinbase rushing out mandates without possibly fully thinking through what those mandates mean for a publicly traded company. This is not about the CEO basically pushing out this mandate, firing and punishing people to a degree that might quash, pushback or argument in the company when in the future he pulls some crap that might actually be dangerous to the company itself. No, this is about artificial intelligence. So anyways, I do think this is kind of an interesting story and something to ponder for you all to think about as you're going forward with your jobs and careers. When the boss tells you to do something, here's the deal. You cannot do it. You cannot do it. Eli, I'm not going to do that. That's fine. You're also probably not going to continue to get paid. Again, we all have choices. There are options in life. There are options in life. You have to figure them out. And I do also think this is an interesting thing, especially this being brought up right now with everything going on in the job market again, with what you have to understand with so many of these founders and so many of these tech CEOs at this point in time is they're a weird generation of CEOs. They're a weirdly emotionally weak generation of CEOs. So much, I talk about this with, Elon Musk does something and he does whatever he does, but then everybody locksteps. They do the exact same thing, right? When COVID happens, everybody agrees that you need to hire as many engineers as possible and everybody should work from home. And then Elon Musk does something. And then all of a sudden, Mark Zuckerberg is firing people, right? Well, if Elon Musk fires people, I can fire people. All of a sudden, Elon Musk starts pushing return to office, and then everybody returns to office, right? And that's the thing is like we're not seeing well articulated, thought out plans. We're just seeing the lemmings of the universe essentially copy what everybody else is doing. And so one of the big things now, right? One of the big issues is there's been this feeling of the past number of years that employees have power. Well, if you're a master of the fucking universe, how do you feel about employees having power? Right? You did not rise to the rank of tyrants to be told by your pissant fucking employees how the business should be run. But if you need to hire employees by the truckload, because everybody else is hiring employees by the truckload, you'll deal with that because you're a benevolent tyrant. But here's the thing, when the economy shifts, when the investment cycle shifts, when all this other kind of stuff shifts, you start to see the nastiness of these bastards really start to seep out. And you start to see them going back to those wannabe tyrannical things. I said, therefore you do. And this is the employment environment we're in. I'm not telling you it's a good system. I am telling you it's a system we have. So I don't know. Starve on your morals or get paid by doing the work. Something to ponder and to think about. And we see this a lot with AI right now. So many of these AI mandates where you must use AI, right? I talked about this before. Microsoft is mandating that the engineers use artificial intelligence, right? Microsoft's AI products are such fucking garbage, right? Nadella literally admits Microsoft's AI products are such fucking trash that their own engineers don't want to use it, right? Literally coming out and stating that when they get their reviews, their periodic reviews, part of the review is whether or not they use Microsoft's shit-ass AI, right? They're literally being told, if you don't use our AI products that you don't actually want to use, it will hurt you in your performance reviews. And so I think this is going to be a big thing that we're going to start seeing more and more of these companies pushing this idea that you have to use AI, regardless of whether or not AI actually helps you with your job. And so that's something to be sitting there and thinking about, like, how do you shine the turd? How do you shine the turd? How do you use AI in such a way that it can be tracked by the system, right? So if you're using corporate level systems, I'm not sure with OpenAI, but with a lot of things, things can be tracked. So how many requests go through. So like your actual token utilization, that kind of thing can be tracked. And so that's one of the things you might think about. Like when you're sitting there in your VS Code and you want nothing to do with Copilot, I don't know, just like, hey, do a loop. Hey, yeah, do a I don't know, do this if-else statement. Like start actually integrating the AI into the bits that maybe that you don't care about, so that the bosses have those numbers, those metrics, right? When the next round of layoffs come, right? They look, they told people to use AI. Half the people, they can see the token utilization. They're using a decent amount of AI. The other half the people basically aren't using any tokens at all. You need to lay off 50%. Who do you think is going to get laid off? Right? So anyways, something to think about, something to ponder. So what do you think about this? What do you think about the Coinbase CEO firing engineers who did not try AI immediately? Is this the sign of a strong CEO or proof of a sniveling piece of shit that just happens to run a large tech company, and is basically unleashing his emotional crap onto his employees? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a moron. Just do it down in the comment section, because in the modern world of YouTube, all that matters is that interaction. And with that, see y'all later.